I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James White, Field Yates, Mina Kimes.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick, Tayler Kyles here for CLNS Media. Not at Gillette Stadium for a pregame show because the Patriots are in Washington. I'm down the Cape. Taylor's back at home. And we're going to get you ready for Patriots versus Commanders. Tonight, 8 p.m. kick, so we're bringing you a 6:30 pregame show here on the CLNS Media Network. We're powered by GameTime and PrizePicks. We'll hear from them a little bit later. But what we're going to do here today is take the next maybe half hour, sorry, I'm just reading the comments. I thought I saw that was tough. I'm making sure everybody can hear me okay.
I think you're good.
All right, word. All right. I'm getting too sensitive with these damn comments. So we're going to go through every position. We're going to talk about position battles to watch. We could sit here and talk about, the Commanders and Jaden Daniels and their new head coach, Cliff Kingsbury, but none of that really matters in game number 3. It's really like the latter half of the roster. And, I saw something actually that Chris Price from the Boston Globe just tweeted a little while ago, and it put kind of tonight into perspective where, we sit here, right, and it's Sunday night, and the Patriots are the final preseason game, and everyone's just rearing and ready to go, for the regular season. But there are guys out there that are going to play their last professional football game of their career, and that's hard to hear. It's hard to see. But this game, right? It's like we're just trying to kind of put it in the rearview mirror and get to the regular season. But this is some of the most important football that people will play in their careers. And so we're going to go through every single position on the Patriots because really, Taylor texted me about what we should do for the pregame show. And he was like, let's go through some positions. I was like, perfect. And then he came back and he was like, well, we can do every position because there's really something interesting. No, but there's something interesting at every Patriots position tonight that has ramifications for the 53-man roster. So let's jump right into it and start with quarterback. We can do Brissett versus May, and I think we can also do Zappe versus Milton a little bit too because, Gerard Mayo said there's a chance Drake May can start week 1. Alex Van Pelt kind of pushed back on that a little bit this week, saying that, yes, in theory, there's a chance, but there's also a way to do this, for a rookie quarterback. But May could go out there 2 quarters and, sling out 300, not 300 yards. That would be a lot for 2 quarters, but 150 yards.
Go past him.
I know. I'm sure Patrick Mahomes has done it before, but, 100 yards, couple touchdowns, and, he could really, push the coaches rather to make a decision. And then we get to the back end of the quarterback room, and Joe Milton looks like he's probably in the driver's seat for the third quarterback slot. But Mike Reese in his Sunday Notes column this morning, floated the idea, what if the Patriots decide to keep 4 quarterbacks? What if I think Bailey Zappe, from where he ended last season, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going on a rant here. I don't think we've heard Taylor's voice yet on the show, but had to kind of, I got to land the plane here soon. But, Bailey Zappe is a guy who last year ended tough for him, had to come in for Mac Jones, but he's been nothing but a pro this season, saying all the right things, doing all the right stuff. It was funny the other day, him and Drake May came up together, and then they had like dual press conferences, and all the media was on one side where he was, and he pointed at the other one. He's like, no, Drake's over there. Like, you guys are going to want that one. So I think he's taking his position, in stride. And yeah, he's someone who you pointed out, Taylor, has had a good camp. Like, he's looked good in practice. He's looked good in games. So long story short, I'll hand it over to you. 4 quarterbacks tonight. Mayo said they're all going to play. What are you looking for from each position, position battle, starter, as well as third-string quarterback?
Well, I'll start with, I don't think that Jacoby Brissett is going to be unseated by Drake May unless something really crazy happens tonight.
Exactly.
Like, I think you would need to see Drake pass for like 250 yards, just like scoring every possession. And also, I think Jacoby Brissett would have to be so bad that it truly did create a situation where you're saying, okay, if, Jacoby is going into the season with this momentum, do we really want this to be the way that we're starting the season? And I said in, I think, one of our last shows that it's like a 35% chance that Drake May starts week 1. After hearing Alex Van Pelt, after hearing TC McCartney, I'm going to drop that to like 20% because I think the biggest thing keeping Drake May off the field is simply not having studied many other defenses. Obviously, he's faced his own defense. He faced the Eagles in joint practices and in a preseason game. and then the Panthers backups and, more of a vanilla scheme in their preseason game, but he hasn't seen a defense that's schemed towards stopping him and the Patriots offense quite yet. So I think they want to get some of those answers on film for him, and I think that's going to come with Jacoby Brissett, someone who understands this offense, who knows how to put those kinds of things on tape for Drake May to actually be able to study. Although I'm sure there are still some answers from Jacoby Brissett's most recent tenure and all these things, but still with this supporting cast, you want to give him a bit of an easier entrance into the league. So I don't really think there's anything that can happen tonight to really thrust May into that starting spot, but it's not totally off the table. Then with Joe Milton and Bailey Zappi, that's another one where it feels like the outcome's kind of written in the stars by now. Joe Milton and Bailey Zappi have had their moments in practice and in preseason games. You've seen Joe Milton, I think, for the most part, protect the ball. He's, gotten into some tricky situations a couple of times. Marcus Jones and Joe Giles Harris at different points this summer have been able to bait him into some interceptions. You remember last week against the Eagles where he had the mistake where he went the wrong way on a bootleg and almost turned it into a big play. Yeah. It's a work in progress, which is why I wouldn't be surprised if the Patriots do try to keep Bailey Zappi around in some capacity. He really has protected the ball well. He hasn't made a ton of wow plays, but he's been consistent. He's been solid. And I think that if something were to happen, that the Patriots maybe wanted some depth behind Drake May, not even behind Jacoby Brissett. I think if Drake May is the starter, maybe, God forbid something happens to Jacoby, I don't think you really want to put Joe Milton out there. I think for all of his talent, you don't want to expose him to the waiver wire. Right. You don't want him playing live snaps. I think you'd probably be more comfortable with Bailey Zappi in that regard. And I'm not sure if he's put enough on tape for any teams to say, we got to poach this guy. Like, we got to get him on our team. As much as I think he does deserve some kind of spot, whether it's on a practice squad or a 53-man roster. So my prediction right now is that he ends up back on the Patriots practice squad this season. Yeah. If something crazy happens, maybe they can elevate him. He also brings more consistency maybe to the practice squad. Some guys are like Joe Milton, where you want the big arm, you want the athleticism, like if you're facing Josh Allen. But then maybe sometimes you're facing Tua, and you just want that guy who's going to stay in the pocket, maybe be a little more consistent with his, accuracy and ball placement and the speed that he's putting on it, because we've joked that's another area Joe Milton. He's gotten better, but can still be more consistent.
Pretty much just has one speed no matter where he's putting the football.
Yeah, and I will say he's gotten better, especially in the preseason games for the most part. I'm like, oh, okay, he's not taking anybody's fingers off when they're 5 yards away. But yeah, I still think Jacoby's your starter. Drake May is your starter of the future, probably more midseason than anytime soon. And then Bailey Zappi has been solid. Maybe he sticks around on the practice squad, has added depth and veteran experience. But Joe Milton doesn't feel like, he's going anywhere. I think they do like his skill set. And I think he's shown enough this summer to get excited about him as a developmental potential trade piece.
I think so too. I think that's an interesting way to look at it too, the way you kind of laid it out there, where Joe Milton could get claimed. You want to keep him, but you don't necessarily want to play him. You'd rather play Zappi early. But like if you cut Zappi, right, it's long story short, you want to play one, you don't want to play the other one. And it gets tough with the waiver wire because you want to bring guys back. You don't think they're going to get claimed. The Patriots the last couple of years have kept just one quarterback. They've let two go to the waiver wire, tested it, realized that they can just bring them right back. Zappi came back right away, said he's kind of found a home here and he's comfortable here. Came back last year. I don't think he would get claimed. The only thing I wonder with Zappi is if he puts enough stuff on tape tonight where they could, dangle him as some trade bait. And that was talked about a little bit last week when, or maybe 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, when JJ McCarthy went down. And it was like, oh, they might need a real backup behind Sam Darnold that they want to go into the season with. They claimed Matt Corral, Patriots legend. So I don't think Zappi's going to be there, but you never know. Something crazy could happen. A team could, float a seventh or for him. But you're right. I think ultimately it turns out being Brissett, May, Milton, and then Zappi. Zappi comes back around on the practice squad. The thing with Brissett that I'll be watching tonight too is something I pointed out on our show, last week, 2 weeks ago maybe, where it feels like now that May's gained some momentum, Jacoby's kind of starting to press a little bit. Like, instead of just being protective with the football, I need to go make plays to make sure that, we know that this is my job right now. I'm the guy. This guy's not here just yet, right? He had the interception against Philly last week where, we've talked about it back and forth. Was it his fault? Was it not? Yada, yada. But regardless, he turned the football over. And there's a couple plays in practice too, where instead of just taking the easy stuff, throwing the football away, not putting the ball in harm's way, which he's been so good at. He has one of the lowest interception rates in the league since he's come in. He was kind of starting to try and make plays a little bit, which, is good if he can make it happen. But at the end of the day, that's what they brought him in for as well, is to be a steady presence in the room who can, bring Drake May along, not put the ball in harm's way, not make mistakes. Early on in camp, he was making the right decisions, the right time, this and that. And it's starting to fall off a little bit lately. And so that's what you'll be looking for too tonight, obviously, is, whether or not he can continue to improve or if he keeps kind of slipping while May continues to get better. All right, let's move on to the running back position, where Ramondre Stevenson, Antonio Gibson, virtual locks. I shouldn't even say virtual. They're making the team. Ramondre obviously signs his extension this year. Gibson comes in as a free agent. He's looked well. It looked good. He's been their number 2 and sort of that pass catching back. The interesting one here is number 3 and really number 4, because Kevin Harris, JaMycal Hasty, basically like clones, a second-tier cloning of Ramondre and Antonio Gibson, right? Harris brings a little bit more of a pass catching element than I think you would expect. But at the end of the day, it's sort of a thumper and someone who can catch the football. And both have looked good, especially the last few weeks, where it felt like we talked about it the other day, where in the offseason, Hasty was shining because it was essentially a passing camp. Harris has looked good lately. Hasty fell off, but now Hasty looks good again. So first and foremost, Taylor, I'll ask you, who is, in your eyes, technically running back 3 right now? Can that person be outdueled tonight with a good game by the other guy? And do you think they keep 3 or 4 running backs? Because right now, I'm sitting here, I think they keep 4. But what do you say on the whole situation?
I don't know if they keep 4, although I do think they want to retain really all the backs that they have, probably outside of Deshaun Fenwick, who I was a big fan of. Haven't really seen much from him. He's already in his second stint with the team and hasn't made much of an impact. But really, it's hard to say who the third running back is, because Kevin Harris and JaMycal Hasty play 2 different roles.
Right.
Like Kevin Harris is more a Ramondre Stevenson type, where he's the downhill guy. He can catch passes. He can pass block. But really, you want him carrying the football and giving you more of that physical presence. He mentioned he wanted to improve his pad level. He's gotten more bursty this offseason. Those things have both made him tougher to tackle. He's looked better overall as a ball carrier. Then JaMycal Hasty is more of your Antonio Gibson receiver type. Now, Gibson is still massive. Like, he's a rare athlete for being as explosive and as big as he is. Hasty is an undersized back, but he does have some wiggle as a runner and as a receiver. He's really looked good on screens and catching passes out of the backfield. He was telling us how the running backs will run routes that receivers run, which he's not really used to. Mentioned how the scheme is really similar to the 49ers, and the Patriots want to be a big screen team. Now, I would give the edge to Hasty for the roster because, one, Kevin Harris was more recently on the Patriots practice squad. He was only elevated last year once Ramondre Stevenson obviously suffered his season-ending injury. So that plus JaMycal Hasty has been with all the top special teams units. He was a core special teamer towards the end of last season after he was claimed on waivers. So I think all that kind of adds up to make it seem like Hasty is going to be the one who makes the roster because of special teams, because he's also a guy who I don't think he's been on a practice squad in like 2 years. So It just makes the most sense. But I do think they're going to want to keep Kevin Harris either on the practice squad, or maybe once, roster shuffling gets figured out, they do keep him as a 4th running back because it's going to be a run-first team. Just tough because I think they're going to keep a lot of receivers. We'll touch on that. Offensive line, too. Tight ends, another one where they may want more depth, even though that depth may not be on the roster right now. Right. And then Terrell Jennings, another guy who I think is going to be on the practice squad. I don't think he's been quite good enough to make the active roster, but he can end up being a diamond in the rough for them if he can develop behind the scenes, because he's been good as a runner. He's been reliable as an outlet receiver, and he's been very good as a pass protector. A little bit inconsistent in terms of, he's not winning instantly on every block, but the effort is there, and sometimes lose initially, but then keep fighting and end up still protecting the quarterback. I really like Terrell Jennings' skill set. So another also downhill thumper kind of guy. So JaMycal Hasty, I think, is going to end up being that 3rd running back on the roster. Right. Kevin Harris returning to the practice squad with some hope that he can contribute this season potentially. And then Terrell Jennings is a guy that I really hope they can get onto the practice squad because he's a lot of fun.
It's funny you mentioned all the roster shuffling there where, guys go, guys get cut, people come back, where we put so much stock into the roster projection, and everyone tweets them and you write them and they do well for clicks and who's going to make the 53. And it's like, what I was just talking about, but with the quarterbacks, where they kept one the last couple of years, and they move things around, they make things work. You end up with a backup. You end up claiming a guy you didn't think was going to get cut, etc. So, like, at the end of the day, it's very important because you find out, who is really in their future plans, but also there's so much more roster maneuvering that's going to happen even now between Tuesday and the beginning of the season. Last year, look at it, right? They traded for Tyrone Wheatley and Vidarian Lowe right at the back end, where we didn't even have those guys in the plans. So it's important, but things will certainly change. And I think running back is a big one there, because of all the reasons you mentioned. We're going to move through with the rest of the Patriots skill positions in just a second. But first, let's hear about PrizePicks. PrizePicks, you can probably, I didn't check, but I'm sure if you're in the Landover, Maryland area down there with the Commanders, you could probably get into this game for pretty cheap. It's the last one. Jaden Daniels isn't playing. I'm sure there's a really good deal over at PrizePicks. Oh, wait. That's game time.
We're just so excited about the game.
But you can probably go on PrizePicks and find a really good lineup for this game. If you go over, it doesn't matter. It's all the same. They're both sponsors of the show. But PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. And you can probably log on right now and put together a really fun lineup with this Patriots versus Commanders game. Some starters, some backups playing a role. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, it's just you against the numbers. All you got to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projection and watch the winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks, turning potentially $10 into $1,000. Plus, if you sign up today, you can get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. It's the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Go do it now. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That is code CLNS on PrizePicks for a deposit match bonus up to $100. PrizePicks, run your game. I'm still cracking up. That's so funny. We've done I've tried to switch it up between which guy goes first, which one goes last between PrizePicks and GameTime. GameTime's been first so long that I'm just in my head. I'm doing reps where talk about the game, talk about a game. That's why we got to pre-record these things like we normally do. But regardless, that was really funny. But go to PrizePicks now, use code CLNS, and get your deposit match bonus and play have some fun on there with tonight's Patriots versus Commanders game, the final one of the preseason. All right, let's move forward, Taylor. We did quarterbacks. We did running backs. I think wide receiver is one of the bigger ones tonight. I really do. I tweeted the Kayshon Boutte gif earlier. You said Del Pettis, which we'll get to. I think those are probably the top 2 guys, top 2 positions where there's really a battle here. And so, look, the 2 rookies in Baker and Polk, Douglas, we got to see about Kendrick Bourne. Tyquan Thornton has become a lock. And it's really kind of turned into the back end of that room where guys are, competing for that, those last couple spots. They may keep 6, they may keep 7. That kind of seems like the sweet spot, for most receiver rooms in the league. Kayshon Boutte is a guy who has come on strong the last couple camps, started out slow, came on strong later, doesn't add much special teams value. Where a guy like Jalen Reagor, not a ton in the passing game, but he's turned into a legit kick return specialist in the NFL. I see you wrote Javon Baker on our shared list as well. Are you just looking to watch Baker? You think there's a chance that this guy gets snipped all of a sudden after a really strong camp? I don't think that's the case, but talk about the back end of the wide receiver room because I'm most looking forward to tonight. I think my number 1 is Kayshon Boutte to come in, play well, be someone behind Tyquan Thornton who can really be like a backup X. And kind of, help this offense move forward. But go ahead on the back end of the wide receiver for me.
Yeah, I just think the Z slot position on this roster, everybody's pretty much locked in. Like you got Jalen Polk and KJ Osborne who emerged as really the starters at that position. It's felt more like Jalen Polk is the starter. Yeah. Obviously, great hands, been aggressive at the catch point. That stands out all the time, even if the downfield production isn't there as much as you might like. I think there's still more potential there. We just haven't really seen it much in camp. KJ Osborne, though, has shown some downfield rapport with both quarterbacks. Yep. I thought he was kind of a fringe lock because I figured if the young guys really emerged and forced you to carry them on the roster, that maybe he'd be somebody who just found himself off because they needed depth elsewhere. But really, KJ, I mean, the leadership he's been lauded for by everybody. Then there's the versatility, the intelligence, the reliability. Those two guys really, I think, are going to be foundational for this offense in terms of the passing game and the run game to a degree. And then obviously Demario Douglas, he looks like he's primed to break out as one of the premier slot receivers, I think, in the NFL. Health is going to be a huge part of that. Obviously, he's missed some time this summer, and obviously last season as well, but ton of talent for Demario Douglas. He should be the leading receiver for this pass catching group as long as, once again, he stays healthy. I cannot emphasize that enough. It's going to be on the play callers and the quarterbacks to make sure, and obviously Douglas as well, to make sure he's not taking some unnecessary hits. But then things get a little more uncertain at the X receiver position because there's a lot of talent, a lot of vertical ability, a lot of after the catch ability, but not a lot of proven commodities. Now, Tyquan Thornton, as you mentioned, he's locked in as the starting X. They've been putting him out there since the spring. We weren't really sure what the reasoning was, but he's been available. He had, the soft tissue injury before the preseason. I was worried that he was going to end up starting the season on injured reserve.
We put him on IR when we didn't even know what the injury was, and he played the game like 2 days later, but that's just how it's gone with him.
Yeah, it was history. I was kind of leaning towards history, but I'm very happy to be proven wrong. We've been saying he needs to be available. He needs to take advantage of his opportunities. In terms of the on-field impact and how you kind of feel from how everybody produced, Tyquan isn't in the same category as Polk, as Osborne, as Douglas, but for the most part, he has been reliable at the catch point. Coaches have said he's gotten better in contested catch situations. I don't think we've seen that, to be totally honest. I'm not really sure where they're seeing it, but I don't think they'd tell us that if it was a straight-up lie. The improved mass that he's put on obviously buffed Tyquan. I think it has helped him with the availability. Hope it continues to help if he ends up, falling to the ground and taking the kind of hits that used to knock him out. And his route running does look significantly better. Or last season, he didn't look like an NFL player. It was looking really bad at times. People were memeing him too.
Yeah, he was being memed. We talked about that route. But I think, too, what they're asking him to do is much different. They asked him to do a lot more in the route running tree last year, right? He was, making almost too many in cuts, having to kind of read defenders. Instead of just using that freaking straight line speed that we talked about, that we know from this guy, I think they're kind of understanding his skill set a little more, what's put him in the mix as well.
I mean, no, they've been saying that he is improved. Tyler Hughes, receivers coach, said that Thornton's improved as a short to intermediate route runner, and we already know he can use his speed. So if they're putting him in this position, I don't think he's just going to be a burner for them. I think they do believe he can win some one-on-one matchups. He's got to prove that. We don't have any evidence that he can do this consistently. His downfield production has been kind of spotty, but that's also been because quarterbacks like Jacoby Brissett's had some trouble kind of getting him, whether he's overthrowing him or underthrowing him. I think now he's kind of understood where a little bit of that sweet spot is. But if he can get in sync with both or one of the quarterbacks, I do think Tyquan can be productive. So, again, he's a lock, even if he's still unproven. Behind him, you got Jalen Reagor as the top backup at X. I think we all know he's more of a kick returner. In that vein, I think he's pretty much a roster lock because he's been the top returner. He really would be a surprise because there's been no indication that he's on any kind of bubble because they have used him, again, as that number two, solo outside receiver, even though that's not going to be a key role. And I think with his speed, he's someone that Alex Ampel can use more as a gadget kind of capacity because they love using guys and little niche roles to set up other things and on screens and stuff like that. So Jalen Reagor, most likely going to make the roster. Now, I do think Javon Baker is a lock. The only question I have is we saw he had a really strong start to the summer after finishing the spring strong. Then he fell off the face of the earth. He's popped every once in a while. He's had a couple practices where there were no drops, but the drops, the inconsistency near the boundary, and then as we saw in the Eagles game, getting bullied out of bounds, those things have been issues. I don't think they're long-term issues. I think he can refine his craft throughout this season and beyond. Maybe you don't want him on the boundary in those ISO matchups as much against certain competition because he might just not be big enough right now to not get bullied in those kind of scenarios. But still, he's clearly talented. You want to keep him around. I wonder if maybe he catches the Foxboro flu and they say, you know what, we need a roster spot somewhere else. We think that he's going to need a lot more development. We just put him on the back burner for a while.
Yeah.
But that's an out there kind of only because it's been so jarring how he went from someone who stood out. Pop was the only one who looked as good as he did for a minute.
Yeah.
And now we haven't seen much of anything. So I just wonder if they try to find some way to stash him just because they're not totally confident in what his role is going to be. That said, that's one end of the spectrum. The other could be, hey, we just want to use him in this niche role. We'll mix him in, give him opportunities to improve his confidence. I hope that's what we end up seeing. But that's the only reason I have him on our list is like a little asterisk.
Okay.
Because I'm just not sure. But really, if you want to talk about the roster battle here, truly, it's Kayshon Boutte and Jalen Reagor if they only want to keep 6 receivers.
Yeah.
Because I do think that Boutte has been good enough that he deserves a spot. We've seen him rep so often with Drake May, Jalen Polk, and Javon Baker, where it kind of feels like that's part of the young group they want to develop. And Boutte has been impressive for a lot of the time that he's been on the field in the preseason. But he has been inconsistent. There are times where he doesn't win at the top of his routes. Sometimes he'll drop passes that he really should catch, even though he also makes plenty of jaw-dropping catches, kind of similar to Javon Baker. So if they only want to keep 6, then they're saying, okay, do we want Kayshon Boutte knowing we have him on a good deal? He's young, he's talented, maybe he'll improve. Or do we want to keep Jalen Reagor because he's a proven commodity as a returner who can give us some kind of vertical and gadget ability? I think that's the one real battle that we're kind of looking at if there's going to be one. But I think they end up keeping 6 receivers, or 7 receivers rather. Yeah. And I also could see David Wallace because of the return value he's shown this preseason. And then Matt Landers just because he's got a ridiculous skill set.
Because he's absolutely massive. Yeah.
Yeah, like he looks perfect for the practice. Like you talk about buff Taekwon, he looks like massive Taekwon. So I could see those guys being on the practice squad. But yeah, Boutte and Reagor, if you're looking for who might get edged off the roster, if they keep 6, I think it's one of those 2.
So a couple thoughts there. Number one, I wonder how much of a lock Reagor really is. I understand they've used him as their top returner, and at the end of last season, he's proved that he was really good. I just don't see he doesn't bring enough value, I don't think, on offense. Now, granted, we don't know what Taekwon brings either. That's my second point here. But the Patriots have repped, yes, Reagor's repped as the top kick returner, but they rep a lot of guys there. Kevin Harris, Jalen Polk's been out there. Kyle Duggar, I think, maybe he's more of a punt returner, but like Isaiah Bolden, that's kind of the guy I keep looking at as like their sneaky, their secret weapon that they haven't put out there. Remember we talked about it a couple weeks ago where he hadn't repped once. We asked him about it. He said, I'm looking forward to playing. Then they put him out there in the game, and then he's kind of repped there a little bit more. He was one of the best in college football. So look, I wonder if Boutte has a good game and they only want to keep 6, then there's a real chance Reagor's off the roster. We'll see what happens. I think ultimately he does make it because I do think they keep 7. Another thought quickly was just on it's on Taekwon again, where it's such an interesting dynamic with him because he hasn't shown us a ton this preseason. He's stayed healthy, and it's been better, right? There's been a couple, shiny deep catches, and he is beating guys. And you mentioned the catch point, but like the overwhelming production that you would expect from not only a former second-round pick but from your top X isn't really there. So I'm hoping, right, we get to the regular season and they can unleash this guy, and he doesn't end up with a higher volume of catches and things like that. I'm curious what his role ultimately becomes in the offense because he's turned into such a lock all of a sudden. He was a guy a lot of people had off the roster early on. He was in that back-end conversation with Boutte and Reagor, and now all of a sudden he's a lock. And I saw Mike Reese, another one. I keep going back to Reese, but someone asked him about his column this morning, and someone said, what about Taekwon? And he just responded with the lock emoji. I was like, this is real. He's making this team get ready for it because he is that top X receiver. I'm curious to see how he fits into the system. And lastly, before we move on, because I know we're kind of rambling on the wide receivers a bit, but like Javon Baker, I wonder about him and the Foxboro flu you mentioned, because that is a thing where you kind of need some acceptance. I don't know if that's the right word, but you need the player to agree to it. Hey, you have an injury, right? Where we're gonna let you develop instead. And Javon Baker is such an alpha personality in a good way. The first thing he said was, I'm going to make people in wheelchairs stand up and get your damn popcorn ready. And he just wants to compete and play football. If they say we want you to sit down for a year, is that guy going to be like, hell no, I ain't doing that? Like, because you kind of need that push pull from the player. Now, ultimately, I think they can sit him down and sort of convince him and understand that this is what we want to do with you. But that'll be an interesting thing to watch as well. I think ultimately they do keep those 7 receivers. It's Taekwon, Pop, Osborne, the 2 rookies, Reagor and Boutte. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what goes from there. I think tonight is very important. Again, for a guy mainly in Kayshon Boutte. All right, let's move on to the tight ends. Hunter Henry, Austin Hooper, those guys are locks. same thing. There's been a couple of these at the running backs too, where there's a guy who just signed an extension and a guy who just signed this preseason or this offseason who is effectively in the lineup and is going to make the 53-man roster. Tight end gets interesting when it comes past those two because the depth is not really there. It's a 1-2 punch and then a rookie in Jaheim Bell who's a seventh round pick, Mitchell Wilcox who isn't that great to begin with and then has been hurt the last couple of days and hasn't practiced a ton. And then there's guys in the back end in LaMichael Petway and Jacob Warren. So what do you make of tight end 3? Does Bell need a good night tonight to make his way onto the roster? We floated the idea with Barth a few times on this show. Is tight end 3 not even on this roster? Do they keep someone and then grab a guy off the waiver wire or something like that? What do you make of the tight end room outside of Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper?
I think Jaheim Bell will be tight end 3 because he's too talented for you to expose to waivers.
Agreed.
And I know you could say that about so many positions, and we always say that about these day 3 picks. They get released, and then they end up bouncing to team, and they don't even settle on a roster at times. But with Jaheim Bell, tight ends, usually the great ones are the ones who profile as the most athletic. A lot of the time, they just need time to grow and learn how to play the NFL game because tight end is such a difficult position. Jaheim Bell is very raw, and I think you see that in a lot of ways. He gets blown up when he's blocking in line. His route running hasn't really translated to the pros, where in college, he was a really tough guy to slow down and get your hands on. In the league, he's been wearing coverage. That said, I do think that he has ability as a guy who's a move blocker, a blocker at the second level, and as an underneath threat. Now, it's a very niche role, but I do think he can give you some value or just be someone who's kind of inactive on game days because you're trying to develop him behind the scenes before he's ready. Now, that said, I think the guy you would want to be the third tight end who actually contributes significantly, can be a good blocker for you. I don't think he's on this team. Mitchell Wilcox missed the end of the summer, and I didn't think he was going to make it before because he hasn't really had a positive impact as a blocker, at least not that I've noticed. And as a receiver, he's been extremely inconsistent. It's like there's different tiers where it's Hunter Henry, super reliable. Then it's Mitchell Wilcox, who's almost not reliable at all. And then Hooper's kind of in the middle there, where he's a little bit of both. So I don't think Mitchell Wilcox makes the roster. Michael Petway has done nothing to impress me since having some flashes in the spring. Jacob Warren, who I was really excited about, the undrafted free agent who was at Tennessee with Joe Milton, hasn't shown much either outside of his literal last practice that we saw. Maybe he sticks around in the practice squad as a big guy with a good athletic profile and history in multiple positions, but he hasn't shown enough in camp for me to think he makes the roster. Am I forgetting somebody? Probably. With this
Petway? You mentioned Petway. No?
Yeah, Petway. So, yeah, that pretty much covers it. Jaheim Bell makes the roster, but this isn't what we need to talk about a lot. They don't have good depth at tight end. They didn't before the injuries hit, and it's just worse now. So, ideally, some kind of Pharaoh Brown-esque player can hit the market. They sign him and have somebody who can contribute because we know Alex Van Pelt loves his tight ends.
Yeah, I think the guy that we've talked about who I've sort of felt like fits it, I think Barth brought it up first, but is Peyton Hendershot in Dallas because they're already stacked at tight end with Jake Ferguson and Luke Schoonmaker from Michigan. So I wonder how many they end up keeping. And that's a guy who has had some success in the NFL and could potentially, be here, log on as tight end 3. But we'll see. I think you're right. I'm excited for what they can do with Jaheim Bell on offense because you mentioned of how much of a weapon he is. He's fast. He can get downfield. He was returning kicks at Florida State at one point in time. He's sort of that move tight end that you can make happen, but I just don't see it right now in the NFL for him. I think he's obviously a developmental tight end as a 7th round pick this year, but a guy who we talked about on draft night or draft weekend fell so far where it's like, all right, let's pick this guy up and see what we can do with him. Those flashes have been there. He had that 3 touchdown day last week. So ultimately I think he stays on the roster, but they may bring in a 4th and end up rostering 4 tight ends, when it's all said and done. And move forward. All right, let's go. We'll do the offensive line. We'll talk about them. We'll hear from Game Time, and then we'll run through defensive special teams before this game kicks off at 8 p.m. tonight. So let's do the offensive line. We know that there's been a ton of shuffling there. Mike Onwenu has been playing right tackle the last couple of days. Chuks Okorafor has been their left tackle. That's someone who I wrote about this morning in my Sunday notes column for 5 players to watch. For how much time the first offensive line how much time that line gets, I'm curious to see how Okorafor lines up and plays because a guy who started on the left side, moved to the right side, got hurt, I don't want to say benched, but they brought him back when they had Caden and somebody else in there. I think it was Lowe on the left side, and then he comes back on the right side, and then now he gets moved back over to the left. It's been a literal full circle for him this summer. They brought him in. They said they thought he could play left. I want to see how he suits up and how he plays tonight. So that's kind of the one guy I'm watching on the starting lineup. But then there's these, back end people in Michael Jordan, Kellen Diesch, and Zuri Henry, where the Patriots' depth, Calvin Anderson goes down last week. Vidarian Lowe goes down last week. These guys are hurt. They don't have the depth. So, could a guy like Diesch sneak on the roster as a swing tackle depth piece? Could Zuri Henry have a night tonight, a couple pancake blocks, and make them think twice about it? What happens here, and what I guess who could sneak on the roster as a depth tight end who people might not be not depth tight end, depth tackle who people might not be thinking about?
You weren't on the
Good job.
Yeah, you were on the right path, because I actually think the person who's going to maybe sneak onto the roster from that group is Michael Jordan, who has spent time as an eligible tight end for the offense. We've also seen Nick Leverett as an eligible fullback. So it feels like those two are getting primed. Yeah, I think they're getting primed for real roles. And Mike Nwenu, we know now, is someone that the team does still consider a tackle, even though he should be a guard. We're not going to get into that. Yeah, that's for times.
We could do an entire podcast on that next week.
True, I literally could. But I do think that obviously you're probably going to have, based on the matchup, the lineup that we've seen most recently, got Leighton Robinson and City So as your guards. Nick Leverett gives you depth at almost every position, but you would also like to have another guard, so you have a little bit more interior depth, because you have Caden Wallace, who can pretty much be your swing tackle, because he seems like a guy they don't want to start quite yet, but that does have obviously that swing versatility, because he's been a career right tackle and he spent some time on the left side this summer. So I think Michael Jordan ends up becoming the guy who benefits. I think he could also be a practice squad candidate. He has spent time on practice squads in recent years, so that could be an option. Also, Vidarian Lowe, we heard that his oblique injury isn't long-term, it's short-term specifically. So you wonder how long we're going to see this offensive line rotation, where, like we have already seen recently, Chuk's on the left side, then Mike Nwenu at right. Yeah, it's just interesting, man, especially with Calvin Anderson out. They really do need a little bit more depth at tackle. I had them keeping 9 when everyone was healthy. Right now it's looking more like 8, but 9 could be Michael Jordan. If they do think they need more depth on the interior. Kellen Diesch and Zuri Henry are more guys I think are going to be on the practice squad. Charles Henry I like for the practice squad. Antonio Mafi, I don't see a role for him on the team at all, to be honest. I just haven't been impressed with him this summer. Feels like they wanted him to show some versatility to play center. That went very poorly. Liam Fornadell took over for him as that third string center behind David Andrews and Nick Leverett. That didn't go very well either. I'm not sure if he has a role, although he could, because he has guard and center flexibility, and he's more athletic than Mafi. But really, I would say my top practice squad candidates are Zuri Henry, Kellen Diesch, and Charles Turner. Antonio Mafi and Liam Fornadell I have as the odd guys out.
Yeah, I'm with you there. No disagreements. But ultimately, like you said too, where I agree, is it's going to be interesting how many guys they end up keeping with where these guys are with injuries. Michael Jordan is a fun one too. Looking back at where I had the room, I think I had him on the roster after week 1 and then off week 2. Looks like that's kind of building momentum here. He played all over the line this week. I think he played some tackle at one point, or maybe it was that tight end eligible role.
Yeah, I think
so. But they played him inside. They're playing him on the outside as well. So that one could be interesting. All right, let's hear from our friends at GameTime. Wait, do you have one more thought first?
I was just going to say really quickly, it was announced that 34 Commanders players aren't playing tonight. So that's game in a row where they're not playing, I think, a single starter from the other team.
I think that's why right now on the GameTime app, you can get into this game for as little as $9. Nope, I'm sorry, $7 on the GameTime app right now. If you live in that area, get down there and get to this game, because although no Commanders are playing, there's going to be some fun Patriots coming off the sideline and trying to rip it up. So head over to GameTime. There are now I see as little as $6. So I think they're literally listening to this ad read and realizing that if they keep dropping the price, you guys are going to go get it. There's super deals. There's amazing deals. There's great deals. I'm not just saying that. That's literally what they're called on the GameTime app. Now that I actually have my read right this time, football season's back. It's here. College started last night. The NFL preseason wraps up tonight. Again, as little as $6 down in Washington. So head over to this game if you want to. You can go pick an upcoming game on the app, and you can browse through seats on GameTime Picks. It's a new feature on the GameTime app that filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats. so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The thing with GameTime too is it's not just sports. Taylor was at a concert last week. Brian was at a concert last week. They use the GameTime app here they use the GameTime app, our great partners here at CLNS. GameTime Picks, again, like I said, it curates it. It makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets today with GameTime. Download the app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. GameTime. Download it today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, let's run through the defense here, Taylor, before we get out. Actually, you know what I do want to mention too really quick? We have a giveaway going on right now on our Patriots CLNS Instagram account. Our producers put this together. We're able to grab a signed Christian Gonzalez mini helmet. So there's a giveaway. Head over to our Instagram account at Patriots CLNS on Instagram. There's directions on one of our pinned posts there. So go check it out. It's pretty cool. Free giveaway with a Gonzalez signed helmet. All you have to do is go and check out the instructions. I'm pretty sure you got to like follow the account and share some stuff, what have you. But pretty cool. There's going to be a chance to win that. So go check that out. All right, let's do the defense and one special teams roster battle that we're going to get into. But we'll start on the defensive line. Armand Watts, Tristan Hill, Sam Roberts, 3 guys on the fringe. 3 guys who have made NFL rosters before. Obviously, Roberts has been around here. Armand Watts in Pittsburgh. Tristan Hill, a second-round pick of the Cowboys at one time. I think Roberts has had his time here. I think Tristan Hill has impressed at times. He's fallen off here at times this preseason. And Armand Watts, man, a guy who was signed, brought in as one of the top, not the top free agent billings for the Patriots because he wasn't paid a ton of money, but he was the second guy they went after. They clearly had something for this guy to make an impact on the defensive line. And, for a position where they're kind of yearning for something to happen with Christian Barmore being out and, different things like Devon Godshaw had a contract dispute early on and was kind of in and out of practice. And Armand Watts just hasn't done a thing. So out of these guys, who makes the team and what are you watching for in tonight's game from these 3?
I mean, for the defensive line, first we got to also acknowledge edge depth because it's almost non-existent this week. Actually, for the past week plus, O'Shane Jimenez and Joshua Uche did not participate in practice, which is pretty discouraging. They're 2 of your top edge guys outside of Manfred Jennings. Then you add to that list Dietrich Wise, who did not participate in the most recent practice that we attended, the last open training camp practice for the media. And you're looking real thin. We saw William Bradley King on the edge with the starters at one point. Really the only guys, if those players aren't ready tonight, you're really only going to see Jennings and Keon White as the guys you expect to make the roster in that group. Hopefully they're not out for too long. Maybe they're just playing it cautious so they're ready for week 1. But if that's not the case, look for them to tap on the waiver wire to try to get some more depth there because it's looking really rough right now. But really there's not a competition on the edge because all the guys who should make the roster should be on the roster because there's not a whole lot of people competing with them. They just, without Matt Judon, things aren't looking good. The interior, though, without Christian Barmore, there could be room for someone else to make the roster. Mike Purcell was cut, which made my roster projections a little easier. I thought he was going to make it. But Devon Godshaw, Jeremiah Farms, Daniel Equale, those guys are locked in. After them, I don't even know if anybody is going to make it, to be honest, because you said it. Armand Watts has been in the game late in the past 2 preseason games, probably going to make it a third tonight. He hasn't
no-show, right?
No, and he hasn't made an impact as a guy who has been a good role player for the Steelers, not showing it against NFL backups who are at the bottom of the roster. That's pretty discouraging. And he's on a 1-year deal, so you can cut bait. You're not really going to have to pay for it in terms of, any long-term ramifications. And then Tristan Hill and Sam Roberts are kind of different sides of the same coin, whereas Tristan Hill is explosive, but he isn't very stout against the run, and Sam Roberts has gotten better and is more stout against the run. It's actually what got him benched last season, midway towards the end of that year. But he doesn't give you a ton of explosiveness. Neither guy has been very productive in the preseason either. They flashed at times in practice, but you haven't seen it in games, which is kind of discouraging. I think those 2 could definitely make the practice squad, but honestly, I don't think any of those 3 make the roster. I think the Patriots end up with 8 defensive linemen to start the season, as long as they don't end up hitting the waiver wire and adding more depth there, which is not out of the question because they could use another 1 or 2 pieces just to round out the edge and the interior.
Yep. All right. That's the defensive line. Let's move back just a hair on the defensive side of the football to the linebacker position, where Jelani Tavai, Jawan Bentley, those are your guys. They ain't going anywhere. Raekwon McMillan, someone who I mentioned early on could be like a surprise cut when we were doing our depth projection series here over the summer, because my reasoning. Never doubt him. I will say I think my reasoning was valid. It wasn't necessarily the play on the field. It was the fact that he's been around. Not that he's been around. They've kept him around, but he hasn't really played a ton of football over the last 3 years. He was always kind of hurt. He was a second-round pick of the Dolphins, I think. He ended up getting cut from them, and then he ends up coming here. But he's played well this summer. He's proven me wrong. So it's those three guys as locks. And then the interesting part is Sione Takitaki, who the Patriots signed this offseason. Elliot Wolf, obviously a big fan of him. If you haven't seen it, Google Elliot Wolf, Sione Takitaki, and you can get like a 5-minute rant from Wolf on just how great of a player this guy is. It was when they drafted him in Cleveland with the Browns. But he's been on the PUP list all preseason. He has not practiced in training camp, so I think we all believe that he's going to remain there and miss the first 4 games. So that next sort of linebacker position, that fourth linebacker spot, Christian Ellis, Joe Giles Harris, those two guys have come on strong as of late. I remember when we were sitting in the booth on Thursday looking, and it's like Christian Ellis is out with the first team. He's been out there a lot with the first team, and he's making plays with the first team defense. He's also been a great special teamer as well, a guy who they claimed last season, late in the year. Joe Giles Harris, again, like I just mentioned, has been making plays of late. You mentioned the interception of Joe Milton earlier in camp, but he's come on strong lately as well. Towards the back end of camp. So what do you see happening at linebacker? I think Christian Ellis has turned himself into as close to a roster lock as possible at this point. I wonder if they also keep Joe Giles Harris in the room, depending on the rest of the depth and how things work out.
So I think Jawan Bentley and Jelani Tavai, we know what they are. The only real notable thing about Tavai is he did mention he wants to have more of an every down role. He's really been more of a rundown player, even though he does have the athleticism, I think, to play in passing situations, maybe mix in or in front of Jawan Bentley, who obviously has been pretty good as an every down linebacker for the past few years, so you don't necessarily want to mess with what's working. But those two guys, you know what they are. They're very good players, cores of this defense. Behind them, Raekwon McMillan, he gets so much praise for what he does behind the scenes, and it's clear every time he's had a season-ending injury, which has been twice since he joined the team, they end up pretty immediately re-signing him and making sure he's still around.
Right.
So he is someone they value a lot.
They give him NFL roster money to basically be a coach the last few years. That's how much they value him in the room. So
like he brings the young guys around. He's a smart guy, very much like a coach off the field. But on the field, he brings athleticism they don't really have at the linebacker position. He's physical. He can do a little bit of everything. He's not really a pass rusher, but like Jelani Tavai, he can bump down and kind of play against the run as we've seen this preseason. So I think he's pretty much a lock. Every year I have him as a virtual lock because I think after the first time I think maybe once I had him on the fringe and I learned my lesson. They're like Jelani Tavai, where you just learn, you're like, all right, they like him. I'm not touching it. That's never happening again. Sione Takitaki, I wish we knew what his role was going to be because the Browns used him as an every down player, but it's like, okay, they have McMillan, who you think is going to play some kind of role. They have 2 starting linebackers who don't really need to leave the field ever if you don't want them to. So it's like, all right, where does Takitaki mix in? Because they clearly like him very much. Maybe they just keep everybody fresh. Juwan Bentley did miss time last season. Maybe that enters the equation a little bit. But Takitaki, like Jelani Tavai and Raekwon McMillan, he can play inside linebacker. He can play on the line of scrimmage. He can be a little bit of a blitzer if you want him to as well. But because he has missed the entire summer on PUP, that spot's probably going to go to either Christian Ellis or Joe Giles Harris. Christian Ellis, we really thought of him as only a special teamer. He's proven to be more than that. He's flashed as a blitzer, had a really great rep against the Panthers center where he just smoked him for a sack. He's also been physical against the run, which you like to see, not afraid to mix it up and get dirty. Joe Giles Harris has more been someone who flashed in coverage. He's gotten his hands on a lot of passes in games and in practice. That's been very impressive. A little bit inconsistent as a tackler in space, but if they do want to keep 5 linebackers, I think they should. That's a lot of linebackers off ball, especially. But maybe I could see Joe Giles Harris slipping on after Christian Ellis. But Giles Harris has also been on the Patriots practice squad, so I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up back there. Ellis makes the roster, but maybe if, health hits the linebacking core, you do see Giles Harris promoted. And then Steel Chambers, another practice squad candidate, smaller than the other linebackers, but he brings more athleticism, special teams value, open space tackling, that kind of thing. So I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up somewhere else. I don't think he's been such an impact player, and he hasn't been so much that you have to keep him around. But I like Steel Chambers, went to Ohio State, good pedigree. So, we'll see what happens with him. Not a lock or anything by any stretch of the imagination, but, interesting player. Dante Hightower's got a very good room.
Sure does. All right, let's move on. Cornerback. I think there's seven guys vying for 7 or 6 spots, really. It'll be interesting to see how many they keep, but it's Christian Gonzalez, John Jones, Marcus Jones as the locks. And then Alex Austin, Marco Wilson, Isaiah Bolin, Marcellus Dial as 4 players who I think all make the team, but I also wouldn't be shocked if any of them were cut. Maybe Alex Austin. That's the one where I think he'll make the team. But Marco Wilson, Isaiah Bolin, Marcellus Dial, guys who could realistically be cut and brought back on the practice squad. I think a battle we're kind of going to be looking for here is Austin versus Marco Wilson, and who can continue to cement himself as worthy of being a down by down rotational piece on the outside. And then Isaiah Bolden as well, I'll throw in there, someone who I'm excited about as a special teamer and as a kick returner. And Marcellus Dial also as a special teamer. We talked about him the other day. I believe it was during our one of our stand-ups down in Foxboro, who we talked to him after practice, and he mentioned his role as a gunner on special teams. And he's been working with not only Jeremy Springer, but Matthew Slater and Brendan Schooler, and those guys have kind of brought him along. It's a position where he didn't play a ton at South Carolina, but they're kind of bringing him along as one of those guys here in Foxboro. So he could add some value there. I'm curious how many they end up keeping and what you're watching for in the room tonight in Washington.
Yeah, so Christian Gonzalez, lock. John Jones, Marcus Jones, they're locks, but health has been a major concern for both of those guys throughout their careers, but you saw it last year. They've also missed time this summer. So I do think, like wide receiver, the Patriots are going to go heavy at cornerback. I have them keeping 7 guys. I'll be posting a roster projection actually tomorrow morning. Look out for that. I'll plug it again at the end of the show. I'm going to edit and tweak things after the preseason game as necessary, but I've got a pretty good idea of who I think is going to make it or isn't. Marcellus Dial is one of the few people I think may be able to change the tides because he's been pretty excellent as a gunner and on special teams. He really has shown out there, and I could see him making the roster as that. He technically brings versatility as a defensive back, but I think that's more in name than execution because he has struggled in coverage. He's been good as a run defender. He's been good in space and as a tackler, but the coverage has not been there. Clearly still a developmental guy. I have him as one of the last players off the roster, but I do have them keeping Marco Wilson and Alex Austin, 2 guys who have rotated across from Christian Gonzalez when they don't have Jonathan Marcus Jones. I could see one of them getting cut for sure, but I think they like the veteran presence that Marco Wilson brings, especially considering if Jonathan Jones isn't healthy, you got a bunch of second, third-year guys technically in Marcus Jones, but guys who haven't played a ton of professional football. Marco Wilson even said that he feels like this is the first time that he's really with a team that takes things seriously. He had a bunch of
a lot of shots at Jonathan Gannon. Yeah,
it was pretty wild, but he clearly likes the system. I think Mike Pellegrino is a fan of his as well. But the thing is, neither he or Alex Austin has been so good that they have outright earned the job, at least for us outsiders. But neither's been so bad that they've lost it either.
Agreed.
And they bring different skill sets. So I think that maybe we could see some kind of rotation of those guys. They'll both participate on special teams, obviously. But that probably is a battle, if we're being honest. Isaiah Bolden, I think, is as close to a lock as you can get past that Christian Gonzalez and the Joneses kind of bubble. Because, one, Gerard Mayo said he should be a special teams demon. We've already seen him line up opposite Brendan Schooler at Matt Slater's old gunner spot. It's like ring-a-ding-ding. I think they want to keep this guy around. Right. He's also been one of the top backups in the slot. And he's got positional versatility. When he was at Jackson State, he lined up literally everywhere in the secondary. I think they really value his skill set, his intelligence, his flexibility. So I have him making it as well. I think Sean Wade makes the team too. Again, Marcus Jones and Jonathan Jones are really – because they're the top slot options. Behind them, it's been Sean Wade and Isaiah Bolden. But then Sean Wade has also been hurt himself. But I think they like what he brings. I think that they know what they have in him. He's solid. He's not going to light the world on fire, but he's not a liability either. And he brings you some special teams versatility and defensive versatility, playing outside or inside. Another guy, I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up getting cut, but I do have him making the roster. And then practice squad candidates, I have Azizi Hearn, who Mike Pellegrino said has improved a lot since he joined the team last year. Another guy with inside-out versatility. He and Marcellus Dial actually seemed like they flipped roles where they were used outside in base groupings and then kicked inside when they had 3 corners. They both did a little bit of that, so you could tell they're trying to cross-train those guys. And Mikey Victor, more of a pure outside corner, might have a future as like a coverage safety, tight end eraser because of his size. Like he smothered Javon Baker on several goal line fade attempts where it wasn't even a contest. But he also isn't a great mover. He is stiff, and there have been some inconsistencies. So, again, I think he's going to be on the practice squad, but the kind of guy whose skill set they like, maybe they turn him into something down the road.
For sure. All right, the position on defense or the player on defense, I guess, is in the safety room that we're going to be watching, sort of like the Kayshon Boutte on offense. This one, I think we all believe, is Del Pettis on defense. Undrafted, out of Troy. I wrote about him this morning where Patriots had a 19-year undrafted free agent streak from 2004 to 2022, I believe, 2004 to 2022. And they dropped the ball last year. Not that they dropped the ball, but they ended the streak. A lot of us thought Malik Cunningham was going to continue it. Unfortunately, they cut him, ended up bringing him back. But regardless, Patriots have kept around UDFAs. You asked Gerard Mayo about it this week, Taylor. He mentioned how important it is for a guy who may be considered a 1-star guy, if he's better than a 5-star guy, can make the team if you're better at him than football. And it doesn't matter what the rankings say. It doesn't matter where you were brought in. If you're good at football and you can play, you can make the roster. And
very Belichickian, isn't it?
Very Belichickian of Gerard Mayo there. And Del Pettis has been that guy. He has come on. I don't even want to say come on strong. He's really been good the entire preseason. And I wonder, look, you have Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers, Jalen Hawkins, and then Brendan Schooler as a guy who sort of is a safety and has been playing some safety as well. But then you have Del Pettis and you have Josh Bledsoe, who I compared Del Pettis to Kayshon Boutte. I compare Josh Bledsoe to Kevin Harris, as I think we talked about this in the offseason, where guys who are just like practice squad, they live on the Patriots practice squad. They have good preseasons. They perform well. They get cut. They end up on the practice squad, they say. I think Josh Bledsoe could be that guy once again. I wonder what happens there. But I'll have my eyes on Del Pettis. I know you've been a Del Pettis fan all preseason long. What does he have to do tonight to become a roster lock as a UDFA?
Keep doing what he's doing. I think that he's probably going to make the roster. Gerard Mayo said he's going to make it a tough decision. And Marte Mapu has I think he practiced 2 days in the entire summer. We haven't seen him since then. Been taking a lot of mental reps. Yeah. Feels like a lock that he's going to start the season on short-term injured reserve at least. And I think that spot, this is a team that likes to use 3 safety packages. So having that 4th safety is crucial depth, because if one guy goes down, you're going to be playing in some packages, if not most of the packages.
Yep.
I think that obviously Jalen Hawkins has really impressed as that number 3 guy. He's a lock at this point. But Del Pettis gives you that true defensive presence that Brendan Schooler may play in blowouts. He may play if there's an emergency situation, but you don't really want him on the field for defense. He's a special teamer who is an emergency option. Del Pettis, I think, is someone who is really physical in the run game, brings some positional versatility, and he's not an air repeater. When we saw against the Panthers, he got picked so badly he ran into 2 people on one play, gave up an explosive gain. But then the next week they tried to do something similar again. He managed to get around it and actually prevented a touchdown in the low red zone. So he just needs to keep doing what he's doing. I really like the hustle, the physicality, the intelligence he's shown. And A.J. Thomas is someone I'll throw into that mix. I like him on the practice squad. He's had a similar, he's got flashes. He's physical. He's tough. Hasn't made the kind of impact plays we've seen from Dell, where Dell in practice just jumps because he's throwing his body around like a freaking psycho. Not as much from Hawkins, but I do like his skill set as a guy they picked up kind of late in the process. Josh Bledsoe, I think he is what he is at this point. Kind of a break glass in case of emergency depth option. But it's past developmental. I think at this point, that's really all he is. He knows the defense inside and out. That's incredibly valuable. but maybe he wants to go to another team where he'll actually have a role, because I just don't think on this team he has the talent level to be someone that is on their active roster unless they just get hammered by injuries.
Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to our final position battle. But first, just quickly from a little news nugget from 98.5 The Sports Hub right now. Gerard Mayo went on with Scott Zolak pregame with Zoe, and I believe Sosi is there as well. And Jacoby Brissett is set to play a series or two, and then Drake May will take it to the half. So Brissett starting. He'll play a couple series. Drake May gets the end of the half, and then I believe second half will be a mix of Joe Milton and Bailey Zappi. So that's what you get to look forward to early on in this football game.
There was also Gerard Mayo. He said that Drake May, I think early on he was deferring and trying to be a good teammate, but now he's competing to be the starting quarterback of the New England Patriots. I know he mentioned that maybe not so much in his play, but more in terms of how he carried himself. It felt like Drake was kind of a little bit more reserved than how we've seen him, like when he was at UNC. Jacoby was clearly like the starter, the leader, and Drake May was kind of just learning and trying to pick up speed. We've seen that he's more comfortable. It's not like he looks like the guy necessarily in terms of commanding the room or the field, but you did start to see a little more of that Drake May swagger come out. So I thought that was an interesting comment from Gerard Mayo.
Yeah, for sure. I think ultimately there was chatter early on that it could be an entire redshirt year from Drake May. And I think that he has quickly over the last couple weeks changed that narrative. It's going to be much sooner rather than later for the number 3 overall pick. All right, let's finish up. This one should be relatively quick, I think, but it's important to note, important to look at, and it's kicker. It's Chad Ryland, it's Joey Sly. Yeah. Joey Sly, in my opinion, is the Patriots kicker right now. I think Chad Ryland needs to do a lot tonight to change that tide, change the narrative. It'll be interesting to see how they play these guys. They've switched off in both games, back and forth during the game. I wonder if we talked about it with Barth on the crossover, if they would give Sly the entire game to say, hey, go win this job, or they give Ryland the entire game and say, hey, go win this job from Joey Sly. So it'll be interesting to see first and foremost how they move the reps around with those two. But is there any chance Chad Ryland can win this thing, or in your mind, just like mine, is this Joey Sly's job?
I think that day that he missed, was it 3 kicks?
Yeah.
Yeah, after that day, I was like, all right, this is done. There was a brief glimmer of hope where it looked like, you know what, maybe Bailey is maybe Chad is kind of, tarting his claws way back a little bit, but I also said that he would have to be perfect to make it a real competition. And after that, it pretty much felt the way it's felt throughout, really since preseason started. It's felt like Joey Sly had a stranglehold on the job. I think Chad Ryland will stick around on the practice squad because he hasn't shown much in the NFL. And I think Bryce Behringer is his best buddy. He doesn't want to leave him. But Joey Sly has proven he can be a kicker in the NFL. Chad Ryland has not. I keep coming back to that because I think it really is that simple when it comes to this competition, because Chad Ryland hasn't been able to distinguish himself and win it outright. So I think it's pretty easy. I think Bryce Behringer, who's had a great summer, one of the MVPs, I would say.
Yep.
Yeah, he is obviously locked in as your punter. Joe Cardona is your long snapper as long as he's healthy. I don't know if Tucker Addington was because of a health thing or if they were just trying to give Joe Cardona, a veteran, kind of, a chill kind of thing towards the end of camp. I don't know. I don't think Tucker Addington's going to be on the roster. But then at kicker, obviously, Joey Sly winning that job by my approximations.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think I agree that the Cardona thing was probably, I think he got hurt one day. Addington came in for some insurance, but ultimately that's Cardona's job. I don't think there's competition there. He's been back and healthy, and I think that's going to be his job to lose. So, or it's going to be his job rather, not his job to lose. But regardless, those are our position breakdowns. We did a long pregame show here for you all tonight, over an hour. It's going to be exciting. There's a lot to look forward to, even though it's preseason game number 3. So make sure to not only watch the game, but follow along with myself and Taylor on Twitter for our game coverage. I'll have a column right after the game, and then we're going to be right back here as soon as the clock hits 0. So make sure to stay on the channel. We'll do a post-game show. We'll talk about all of these position battles, really, and who shined, who stood out, who didn't, and what we think happens prior to Tuesday's cutdown day. So we're at like 2,400 viewers over YouTube, our socials, Twitch, all of it. So we appreciate the hell out of it, guys. Thank you so much for staying here and previewing this game with us. We'll be back after the game. Until then, rate, review, subscribe to the channel, and Do we do it on? Yeah, we'll do it.
We'll save it. We'll save it for later.
All right, sounds good. Come back, go watch the game. NBC, Pats Commanders, come back post game, and we'll talk about everything. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys soon.